Welcome to this week's video tutorial with Virtual Racing School for the Porsche iRacing Cup. The series takes us to the relentlessly long and challenging full Nürburgring circuit in its 24-hour Gesamtstrecke combined configuration. I'll be analysing a lap driven by Rens Broekman, who has as usual run in default afternoon weather on race fuel. Since we visited the Nordschleife layout on its own last season, I'll be looking at just the GP circuit this time, but a link will be provided to that tutorial in the description below. Okay, so we'll play the lap through first in full, before then going into further analysis. Okay, so that was an 8-minute 29.961. Okay, so as ever we'll start off on the VRS website. We've got data packs selected, and we're going to choose the Porsche iRacing Cup data pack as driven by Rens Broekman. We're going to choose the Nürburgring Nordschleife 24-hour layout, which is week 5. Loads up the session details, where of course you can download the lap files, a replay and the setup. We're going to click on Learn Track, which will load up the video and the analyzer. It will start to play the lap through. I'm just going to pause it quickly, and for those of you who might not be familiar, we have a variety of telemetry traces from the car. So we've got a steering input, speed trace, brake and throttle inputs, and some live steering and brake and throttle inputs as well from the car. So we can't really see much in this full track mode up here because it's such a long lap. There's so much information crammed into a small space. So we're going to select sector 1 to start things off, which is the run from the start finish line to the braking zone for turn 1. So I'm going to play this through. Obviously just keep the car nice and straight. Now notice how Rens follows the edge of the track and to a point, and that moment is roughly now, where he jinks the wheel. I'll just slow it down as well. He jinks the wheel ever so slightly to the right and sets the car up on a trajectory that's going to take him towards the outside of turn 1. So if he was to stay pointing this way, he'd end up running wide on the brakes, so that's quite important. So we go to sector 2, and this allows Rens to he's now pointed the car at the outside of turn 1, which allows him to brake in a straight line all the way until that point. So can't afford to brake too hard into here because the circuit drops away down the hill and the car goes a little bit light. So you have to make sure you brake early enough, which is very early in this car, I would say. There's not really any references to really pick from. So the car gets taken towards the outside of the corner by the time that he's finished braking, and only just take it a little bit further through. Only now does Rens really start to turn into the corner, so it's quite late, and we're all the way down in second gear. It's a very slow first chicane to start the lap off, and it's very important that you do hit this first apex because it's going to set you up for the left-hander. So as he's turning in, he's bleeding off the brakes, but holding those brakes all the way into the apex to help the car rotate. Just show you the external view of that. So he's picked up with his apex there nicely. A short bit of throttle in between the two corners, but he's keeping the car nice and tight over to the right, almost setting up for the Mercedes Arena layout, but this time we're going to take a shortcut through to the left. So at this point we can see Rens just dabs the brakes again briefly just to slow the car down slightly into the next left-hander, and again not accelerating the car, being patient with the throttle, waiting until he's apexed before picking the throttle up, because your exit's quite important here. So he's on the throttle at the apex, but then shows patience on the exit. So we can see here that Rens is modulating the throttle, waiting for the car to build in traction. We're still in second gear. As the car straightens up, then he can finally commit to full throttle, and it's not until he's pretty much reached the Mercedes Arena layout before he's actually back on to full throttle there, and then obviously using all of the exit track available there. So running down to the next banked left-hander, there's another alternative layout which is going to be the braking point into this one. So pretty much where these cones are on the right, just before there, is when Rens is going to hit the brakes. Not braking too hard because we want to turn in fairly soon. This corner is really banked, so you want to make sure you turn in early enough to take advantage of that banking and keep the car nice and tight on that apex. So Rens picks up the throttle quite late this time because he wants to keep the car reasonably tight on the exit, so not using all of the track width here on the exit, and then pretty much as soon as the car is facing the middle of the circuit, he's back on the brakes again for the next right-hander down the hill. So again, can't afford to brake too aggressively here, and you have to turn in reasonably soon, which means that you have to bleed off the brakes quite soon as well to avoid locking up. It's very easy to lock up a wheel here, especially as it leads into a heavily cambered corner once again, so the inside front will go very light, and in fact we can see the wheel lock-up lights are lit, so even though Rens has bled off the brakes quite a lot, he's still got that inside front locked up, but it's very unloaded, so it's not too big of an issue, kind of unavoidable really. So picking up the throttle there at the apex at the bottom of the hill in second gear, a little bit of patience on the exit before committing to full throttle. Rens actually probably commits a little bit too early because he's got some nasty oversteer there on the exit, which he collects, but it does get quite nasty. We can see the corrections in the wheel here and here, but catches it nicely and keeps the car relatively close to the inside edge of the circuit on the run down towards the Dunlop hairpin, where you've got some runoff area here, some grass crete on the left. That's pretty much going to be the braking point into the hairpin, and you can brake quite hard into this one, and when you turn in you need to be once again bleeding off those brakes to avoid locking the inside front, and as you get closer and closer to the apex, bleed off more and more and more, but don't let go of the brakes. If you're off the brakes entirely and you're coasting, the front end is unloaded and the car will understeer, so you need to hold on to those brakes all the way into the apex to keep the car rotating. Now this corner sort of has two apexes, but you don't really need to hit the first one. It's more important for you to hit the second one on the exit. You're going to be on the throttle as well in the middle of the corner, but hopefully you'll have slowed the car enough in the middle of the corner by holding and sustaining these brakes so that the car will still rotate even though you're in the throttle. So Rens is in the throttle now, on the limit of traction, is maintaining that throttle, waiting for the traction to increase, and he's also picks the car up towards that late apex for a good exit. So at this point we can open the car up and get to full throttle, take advantage of this exit curb and let the car run gradually out wide towards the Schumacher S. Now Rens does just very slightly get onto the curb there, but just a note about that, the curb is quite aggressive, as are all of the Nordschleife curbs, so you want to exercise a lot of caution with them. Obviously you want to open the corner up, but just be aware that you can unsettle the car if you do use too much of that curb. So on the approach to the apex here, again very banked corner, so just tease those brakes to get the car to rotate, to keep the front end loaded up, and pick up the throttle nice and early once you feel like you're on a nice line through the S, and you'll be able to make it through the exit nearly at full throttle if you do this. So reach full throttle just there, but then I sense that Rens feels he's running just a little bit wide in the middle and has a slight breathe out of the throttle, which is confirmed because he's up onto this curb, which is kind of the fastest line, but I suspect if he was to maintain full throttle there he would have got really out of shape. And again, using that exit curb as well, using all of the track. Approaching the next left-hander, you're going to pass under this gantry. That's pretty much going to be your braking point for this one. So sustain those brakes until in between the 100 and the 50 before turning in. Don't want to turn in too late into this one, and aiming for this inside curb. holding those brakes onto that curb and picking up the throttle as you apex. So we're on the curb now and Rens is picking up the throttle. For the exit, however, don't need to use all of the track available, and the reason for that is you want to bring the car back over to the left as quickly as possible. So another thing that Rens is doing is just modulating the throttle and keeping that throttle steady, not rushing to get straight to full power. Does eventually, but it's very brief before he then has to start braking again for the next right-hander. And just a note about that, Rens starts to brake pretty much from the middle of the circuit, and he's also aimed the car to the outside of the right-hander. So as he's braking here, the car is still travelling towards the outside of the corner. And this corner basically starts quite early, so you need to brake very gently and just keep the front end loaded up so that you don't get understeer. You don't really need to slow the car down that much, it's more just to rotate the car through and into the entry. So wait for the ideal opportunity to pick up the throttle, which is going to be fairly late, and then once the car is into that apex nicely, you can pick up the throttle quite hard. In third gear there's plenty of grip here, so Rens picks it up straight to about 75% there before modulating slightly and then eventually committing to full throttle. Now I just want to go back to that moment because it's quite common to experience some oversteer here as you're picking up the throttle. So there's a slight correction for oversteer just there, which we can also see in the steering trace. You want to try and anticipate that if possible, and then on the exit open the car up and use all of this curb here on the left. So just going to fast forward it, or speed it up to normal speed, hug the inside right towards the final chicane on what is the Grand Prix circuit. So we're just going to go to sector 8, and the braking point into this chicane is going to be at the 100 marker here. I'll just slow it down again. So this 100 marker, that's going to be your braking point, and sustain that brake pressure. Now this chicane is faster but later than the Grand Prix style circuit layout, so even though you're actually turning in later than for the tighter chicane, it is a faster chicane, so avoid turning in too late and try and carry lots of speed through here if you can. So again, notice how Rens holds that brake pressure all the way into the corner, but then picks up the throttle actually very, very early. So we'll just play that through. So before we've actually apexed in the first half, he's already back on the throttle using a decent amount of curb. You can use a lot of curb here. The real risk is getting a penalty or an incident through cutting too much. But yeah, obviously you want to try and straight line the chicane as much as possible. But notice that this time, even though Rens has picked up the throttle really early, he's sustaining that input level and modulating. And he'll continue to do that and doesn't actually reach full throttle for a long time. So again, through the right-hander, using lots of curb, it's nice and flat. Just being aware of getting a penalty for using too much. And then waiting with the throttle. Try and avoid running the car onto this curb on the exit. Again, it's very tall, very severe, and really can upset the car if you do that. So once you reach that point, you can finally commit to full throttle very briefly. Don't really worry about rushing to full throttle there, and because you need to start braking again quite soon for the last corner on the GP circuit. So quite an early braking point for this one, and we're aimed towards the outside of the corner when we start braking, and we can see that Rens sustains that brake pressure for a long time. Keeps the front end loaded up, turns in fairly early. It's a very long entry, very long wide entry, and then it tightens in the middle. So you want to sustain that brake pressure, keep the car rotating all the way into your apex, which is going to be about now, where the circuit goes ever so slightly up the hill, and Rens picks up the throttle there nicely. Has a little bit of oversteer moment which he corrects nicely before then reaching full throttle and running the car all the way up towards the wall as we now go on to the Nordschleife layout. I'll just go to sector 11 briefly because I just want to show you this. From the GP circuit, it's a shorter run to the first corner at the Nordschleife, so you can afford to brake a little bit later than you would if you were coming directly from the end of the Nordschleife run. So there's a red painted area on the Armco on the right. That's pretty much going to be the braking point into this one this time. The rest of the lap is pretty much going to be exactly the same as last season's tutorial, so make sure that you do check that out. We'll post a link in the comments below. You can find qualifying and race setups, telemetry and replays over at virtualracingschool.com, where you can also book one-on-one tuition with myself and top drivers from the likes of Sim Sport. Good luck for this week and feel free to post any questions or comments below. Thanks for watching.